Alright, so this is a new series I was going to try out for this month. There's going to be 7 of these planned for this month, and then 1 more for October, and if it goes well, maybe we'll keep doing it. The thing about it is that it's something that I've kind of been dreading to do for a long time, and that's going back and looking at old videos. And I've been saying a lot that there's a lot of stuff in old videos that I have no idea what I said in those videos. I don't know if it's competent at all or has anything to do with how I feel about a movie now, because obviously as time goes on your opinions tend to change. So that's another thing I feel like we're going to kind of touch on a lot here, is the reason I've chosen the ones for this that I have for this month is they're movies that I've seen again multiple times kind of over the years since they came out, and I'm just not really happy with what I probably said, and my opinion has kind of changed. There are movies that probably didn't get, like, a fair chance or anything like that. Or maybe there's cases where I'll be surprised and kind of stand by something that I've already said, but the ones I chose specifically are ones that I feel like I didn't really... I didn't really praise them enough, and I kind of got to appreciate them as time went on. So, naturally, we're going to start with Mad Max Fury Road, which I did like when it came out, and I said a lot of positive things about, but I also didn't go as crazy for it as everybody else did. So, I wanted to kind of look back on that and see if I maybe possibly embarrassed myself. And so, we're just going to look at, obviously we won't look at like the whole video, because that would be not only too embarrassing, but unnecessary, so we're just going to look at the points that I feel like I can either stand by or correct or try to decipher what the fuck I was even talking about. So, let's go back to May of 2015 at this potentially wretched video and see what I had to say about Mad Max Fury Road. I gotta mention this real quick. We had to do something that I really didn't want to do. We had to watch this in 3D. Which, apparently the plan was to shoot it in 3D, but then I don't know if they ran out on the budget or they ran out of time or what, but they just decided to shoot it in 2D and then convert it. And obviously, as we all know, every single person that's ever been to a movie in the world knows that 3D conversion is one of the worst things in the world.
Yeah, it really is.
I hugely prefer seeing a movie in 2D, and I really wish that we had seen this in 2D. There was nothing that made me think otherwise.
Nope.
And I think maybe, I'm not sure, maybe I'd be more enthusiastic about it if we had. So yeah, that's something I can definitely stand by, and I don't really know of a time, except maybe outside of like an Avatar movie or something, that 3D has really enhanced anything. There was Gravity, but certainly nothing has been improved by 3D conversion. So, and it's to my understanding that George Miller actually said at the time to see it in 2D, like, he made sure to make that a point, that the 3D conversion wasn't really any part of the original plan whatsoever. So I do think that may have also had to do something to do with why I wasn't completely enthusiastic about it, because it's not only that, but I don't think it helped the opening scenes either, because even to this day I can say that I'm not a huge fan of the opening scenes where, like, the frame rate goes up and we get these really... It's, like, way too frenetic and we're getting these flashes of Max's visions and stuff like that. And I definitely think that's something that was not... That being the opening scene was something that was not helped by the whole 3D thing also. So, and... Like, also I just find 3D to be pretty unmemorable. Because, like I say, like, besides maybe Avatar and maybe Gravity, like, one thing I think of is Dread, where everybody builds up that, oh man, they wish they had seen Dread in 3D when it was in theaters and stuff like that. And it's like, I genuinely can't... I saw Dread in the theater, and I genuinely cannot remember if I saw it in 3D or not. I think I did. I feel like I did, but I... Honestly, there's really no solid memory of it. So, yeah, that definitely probably wasn't helping anything. But yeah, and we have new characters also, like Furiosa, who is Charlize Theron, who's basically trying to get home. That's basically her story. There's more to it, but I'll let you see it unravel. So yeah, I was really downplaying Furiosa's involvement in the story, it seemed. I think part of that was also since I did those kind of reviews like right when the movie came out, I was trying to avoid like being too revealing or being too spoiler or stuff like that. But I'm also blatantly downplaying Furiosa's role in this, especially since there was a lot of talk when it came out, I do remember, about the fact that even though it's called Mad Max, she's basically the main character. Like, she's the lead character pretty easily, and Max seems to almost kind of been dropped into this Furiosa movie kind of by accident, and he kind of seems annoyed by it, too, in this great way that only Tom Hardy could do. But, yeah, and when I talked about before about how I wasn't really a big fan of the opening scene, I feel like, and maybe this is controversial, I don't know, if you look at it as a movie that's being led by Furiosa and her story, if you cut out the whole opening scene and the opening shot was the back of Furiosa's neck, like that shot is after we see the title, and the movie just went from there, and Max was just already captured, and we kind of got the vibe that maybe that would have something that happened in between, Beyond Thunderdome and now, because obviously so much time has passed. I don't think anybody would have asked questions if this movie started with Furiosa and Max was just already in the cage with the War Boys, but maybe that's just me, I don't know. And the fact that the way she carries herself through the movie also, where she obviously needs Max's help and she needs help along the way, but she's a character that you feel like is never not in control, which is something else that's very much the sort of big personality trait of a lead character that's leading the story. And not to mention the fact that the personal story with Joe, like the personal vendetta with Joe and the back and forth they kind of have from a distance, but we get it. And then the one time they face off is obviously when she kills him, so the big bad villain. So all of this directly points to Furiosa pretty much being the lead character. I feel like that's not just some talking point that people were doing, that's literally the point. And we have Nux, who is Nicholas Hoult. They're called the War Boys, and they basically worship Immortan Joe. I mean, he's kind of flip-flopping back and forth between whether he's on the good side or the bad side. He's kind of a neutral party, I guess, for the most part. But he's like the only character that gets a real, arc in his story, so... Okay, so of course I stand by the fact that Nicholas Hoult is great in this, and the fact that Nux is like the character that has a really big arc, when you look at everybody else. But I'm definitely embarrassingly downplaying the fact that Nux is, when I said he was flip-flopping, obviously there's significantly more to that. The fact that Nux is also one of the more sympathetic characters in this story, despite the fact that he's one of the War Boys and he's part of Immortan Joe's whole crew. But the thing about it is, it seems pretty clear that when you look at Immortan Joe and the way the War Boys look at him and how they have their certain chants and stuff like that, it's very clear that the War Boys are basically a cult under Immortan Joe. So basically, anytime you see one of the War Boys, you essentially see somebody that's a victim of Immortan Joe. And we kind of get that vibe when we see like the sort of turning point that Nux goes through. And when we actually see him also, he kind of, looking at Nux specifically, basically humanizes all the rest of the War Boys, where we see all these people that are just sort of, like, they're essentially his lost boys, and they're doing everything they can to please him. There's that moment where Nux is actually going to try to kill Furiosa, and he fails. And even though Furiosa is the hero and the lead character, and somebody that we want to see get to the end and get her revenge and do all that stuff, and find this, obviously, we get her tragic story as it goes on, but we want the best for her. But yet, in this moment, when Nux is going to try to kill her, and he fails, and Immortan Joe screams mediocre and basically rejects Nux forever, somehow, someway, we feel bad for him. Or maybe that's just me, I don't know. But it's like, I didn't want him to kill Furiosa, but at the same time, you can like see his pain when he feels rejected and is essentially cast out. And you, like I said, you can look at Nux and kind of see that in everybody once you get the gist of it. Like the moment where the War Boy gets really excited about having found Max's boot, and like he's basically praying for some sort of compliment or some sort of good job or something. And he's just left hanging. And it's like, because of that, you get this, you really humanize these characters that are essentially just, flying around and, you know, are doing all the violent things that Immortan Joe won't do or can't do. And it just kind of spells everything out in this great way without spelling it out, if you know what I mean. And we also obviously get that moment with Capable where he's talking to her. It's really just one scene where he kind of bonds with her, but it's also just a slowed down enough moment where, like I said, the humanizing really starts to come out. And like I said, the domino effect of when you can humanize Nux, then suddenly you understand all the War Boys and where they're coming from, which is great. And yeah, obviously his final moment, when he has his full arc and he crashes at that last time. And it's this really beautiful moment that you do not expect to have with Nux the first time you meet him and you see all the other War Boys, and gives you a whole understanding of an entire group of characters that we've seen throughout it. And there's so much behind that character, and obviously Holt is perfect. There's one thing I kind of wish I didn't know about going in. There was one thing where I saw something, I don't know if it was in a review or a headline or something, but somebody just said the words, "You had me at flamethrower guitar." When you have these car chases in these Mad Max movies, there's always a whole army of them, and there's always something fucking crazy about them. Once again, in Beyond Thunderdome, we were kind of getting less and less in quality, and the most we had was the cow print car. We're upping things as much as they can possibly go. There's the car that is just entirely made of spikes. Not to mention this entire big-ass chase scene that's like the entire first half hour of the movie, where Max is basically Nux's hood ornament. It's so interesting to look back and be talking about the moments that are in this movie, just sort of casually, like saying like, oh, this moment was cool, and this moment was cool, and stuff like that. And a lot of the stuff being talked about here has now gone down in like movie history as an iconic image, which is really wild. We're talking about Max basically being the hood ornament with Hardy with the mask on his face. That's an image that's just instantly recognizable across movies now. The Doof Warrior with the flamethrower guitar and all that, instantly recognizable image. The line, "What a Lovely Day" by Nux is something that's you just know immediately. And it's like seeing history in the making without even hardly realizing it. Like, people were freaking out about the movie at the time, undoubtedly. But I honestly did not know how many of these images were going to become iconic throughout, which is wild. When they realize that the Green Place is gone and Furiosa drops to her knees and screams, an image that's just... Like, you look up this movie, that's probably one of the first images you'll see. And the Spike car I mentioned, which is iconic in its own right. Also, I think I was very close to seeing Peter Weir's The Cars That Ate Paris right after I saw this movie, or shortly after I saw this movie, not realizing the connection. I think it's also called in some places The Cars That Eat People, but that's also a really great and surreal movie that you should check out also if you haven't. And Weir is obviously another great, iconic Australian director. And another thing goes back to like a year or two before we even talked about Fury Road.
It's worth noting that obviously there is a fourth one coming where Tom Hardy plays Max. Obviously not the same character, but the guy that plays Toe Cutter in this one is in the new one.
Really?
Yeah, little did I know back then that Hugh Keys-Byrne would not only be coming back for this movie, but the fact that he would be playing another villain, and the fact that it would go down as probably one of the most iconic villains we've had, at least in the last decade. Another thing that's just completely recognizable, and it's the voice and the fact that I talked about how the War Boys just kind of go out and do violence for him, but yeah, it's also worth noting he does come down and he is within the action for most of the movie, which is something that's kind of rare to say about a villain like that that's seen as like this big bad that's like up in a tower and stuff like that. Usually they stay up there, so everything about this villain really stands out, and that's, like I said, it's weird in retrospect that I would have never seen it coming, but I don't think I did, which is wild. A scene I'd never thought I'd see in one of these movies, probably because of budget constraints in the 80s. The scene where they go inside the sandstorm, and everything that happens in there, and it's like being inside hell. Yeah, that's another thing I stand by about the sandstorm and how it was, him being able to embrace using effects that they didn't really have back when he was making the other movies, and making something that felt much bigger. But something that I didn't go into in this video at all was the fact that I don't think I realized it at the time, because when I went into this movie, and because I try not to look too much up, especially something with so much hype around it, but I don't think I realized, like when I watched it back then, I think I just assumed there was a shitload of CGI in it. And of course, one of the things about this, like one of the most famous things about this movie, is how not that CGI reliant it was, where a lot of this is practical effects and actual things flipping around and actual people in this massive, massive scale, with CGI just kind of enhancing as it goes. But a lot of the really thrilling stuff being pretty much real. So that's something that I would have never known to, I wouldn't even known to appreciate it at the time, which is really wild now. And the fact that, as far as it feeling like it's bigger and on a much more massive scale, the fact of the way Miller has been a really adaptive director as he's gone on, where it's like, regardless of how old he gets, regardless of how far apart his movies are, he always feels like he's like setting trends. Like, obviously the Road Warriors really set the trend for like post-apocalyptic movies and what they look like. And then he came here this late into the game, this late into his career, into his life, and this movie obviously was every action director in the world was looking at this going, oh shit, that's what we should be doing, that's what we need to be doing. And it's, yeah, so not only that, but it feels, he was able to feel like one of the other movies. Like when you watch the natural progression to the first movie, to the Road Warrior, to Beyond Thunderdome, to this, tonally, it follows a progression and feels like it's right in tone, but also feels like he's really in the modern world of movie making now also, when this came out. So that's really wild also, and something else. And technically there were a lot of things that I didn't even mention, that I'm shocked I didn't mention looking back, like the editing. Margaret Sixel's editing, which obviously won her an Oscar. And the reason that's the case is, I look at a movie like this, and I don't even know, like, where you even start. It's like, you look at how this movie's put together, and you just ask, like, how? And that's like, you can look at that on the production scale, like, everything you're looking at, the practical effects, and the production design, and all that stuff, the costumes, and you can say, like, good God, where did they even start? But it's like, once all of that is done, and it's being edited, you can you can circle back around to the same feeling of, how did you put all that together to make it look like this? Like, it seems impossible that this movie even exists. And this is what people were saying back in 2015, and I'm just catching up. And it's wild. So there's that, and somehow I failed to also mention the Junkie XL score in this video, which is crazy. It's another one that's basically one of the stars of the movie. I had somebody I knew at the time said that they would listen to the soundtrack when they would go to the gym. And, like, every time they said that, I had this image of them walking into the gym just kind of, like, normal, and then they walk out of the gym and they're just jacked, like, abnormally jacked. It's amazing. Everything about this movie adds to its massive personality in a really great way. Like, nothing is slacking here at all, and it's really incredible. It's not something that needs that to be anything more.
They could have pushed a hard PG-13 and it would have been fine.
Yeah, that would have...
Hard PG-13.
There was a lot of fuss around. We talk about how Beyond Thunderdome is kind of the one that's... Oh, that one's in the series too.
Mm-hmm.
That one's PG-13, while the others are. And I think people were afraid if this had gotten a PG-13, which nowadays would happen. Like, a lot of people were were entirely under the impression it was probably going to be at first. They probably thought they'd be getting another Beyond Thunderdome if it was PG-13.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah, as far as this rating debate goes, it does feel like it just feels visceral enough. It's kind of hard to explain, and I'm not quite sure how to approach it, but it does feel like it's visceral enough that it just kind of feels like an R-rated movie. The two scenes that come to mind, obviously, are when they have to take the baby out of Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, and Immortan Joe's face getting ripped off. And if those scenes weren't in there, maybe this could have gotten by, but like I said, it might just be so visceral. That might be what got it the R rating, I don't know. But yeah, we had a whole conversation about that here, but that's just something that I don't even really think about anymore. Like, they're just so arbitrary anymore. But yeah, so that's pretty much where I stand on that, though there was kind of a continuation to that.
Yeah, I love that there was no compromise with this either. I guess there were a lot of complaints. A lot of people complained that it wasn't bloody enough.
Mm.
I can kind of see where that could be weird for people, but at the same time, when it needs to be, it gets there. There's not really that many scenes that really, really call for it.
So yeah, I actually don't even remember these complaints about there being a lack of blood. I don't really think it affects anything. I feel like there's just enough there, and like I said, I don't think there's any scenes that really call for it outside of the ones I mentioned, which are just two and brief, very brief. So I don't know, and that would be weird if there were complaints about that also, because the other movies aren't really bloody. A lot of it's just kind of implied, as far as I remember. So I don't really know what any of this is about, but I don't really think it would impact much of anything, as far as, you know, how much blood is in it or what it's rated or anything like that. So I don't care.
I think it's one of those movies where it'll eventually die down a little bit, but there's a lot of love for this movie right now. It's had a 99% for like a really, really long time now. It was 100, then it was 98, and now it's back up to 99. The last I saw. It came out today, so I'm sure it'll, you know, go to a more stable number.
Well, that's hilarious in retrospect. Yeah, this is what the Rotten Tomatoes score is right now. So, no, it didn't really have to die down at all, and nobody really sort of pulled away from it. And not only that, yeah, like I was saying before, it won a few Oscars. It won 6. It actually won so many Oscars. There was a moment that night where Louis C.K. was presenting one of the short categories, and Mad Max had won so many up to that point. When he was opening the envelope for the short category he was presenting, he joked and said it was Mad Max, and it got a laugh from everybody. So that's how much it was beloved still at that time, by the time the Oscar ceremony came around. And yeah, it's still considered now to be not just one of the best action movies of the last decade or so, but you'll have quite a few people saying it's one of the best action movies of all time, from what I've heard. So yeah, that was just completely way off. So, like I said, I really wish I had known I was seeing something so iconic in the making, but for some reason, it just did not click. But here we are now.
I don't know. It's way too early to say how I would put it up with the others. So I'd need to watch like all 4 of them again, like down, like maybe a year from now when this one's like really, really settled in and it can be seen from that kind of perspective. But like I said, this is coming from somebody where the first one was always my particular favorite.
Alright, so instead of a year down the road, I suppose it's 8 years down the road, but we can try to do this. I still feel like I would say the first one and this one are kind of interchangeable as far as my top choice, because obviously we talked about all the greatness with this one. As far as the first one goes, I do just love the simplicity of it. How it's a classic story told with like this. It has like the simplest structure, and it was told with like the simplest means, but it's just as strong and impactful as anything. Particularly in this sort of genre, I guess that one kind of falls more into the revenge genre in the sort of classical sense, while this one obviously is this monster in all ways. But I would say I'm more likely to rewatch. The first movie is the one I'm most likely to rewatch of the 4, I guess. With this one like right behind it, because once you watch this one, I kind of feel exhausted, which is great. But like I said, if I was like gonna rewatch one, the first one's probably the first one I'd grab, and then this one. But like I said, they're pretty much interchangeable. And then obviously that would be followed by The Road Warrior, which is so wildly creative and unique, and the characters also, like the characters especially, really, and the way that it just sort of laid the groundwork for this whole genre that would become like the post-apocalyptic, you know, action movie, with an all-time great climax, of course. And I spend a lot of this video hating on Beyond Thunderdome for some reason. I don't feel that strongly, really, one way or the other about Beyond Thunderdome. Beyond Thunderdome has a great start. Like, the whole opening and then the Thunderdome scene is great. it's the middle I don't really care for, where he's like with all the kids, and it almost feels like it turns into a kids adventure movie almost, which doesn't really feel the vibe too much. But then the climax comes, and the climax of Beyond Thunderdome feels like this great precursor to what Fury Road's greatness would be. And like I said, you can see that natural progression from the climax. The climax of the first movie is obviously amazing in a much more downplayed way compared to these. But like I said, you see what the Road Warriors climax looks like, and how it kind of got amped up and was longer in Beyond Thunderdome, and then it is most of a movie now in Fury Road. So that's how I would go. 1 and this are sort of interchangeable, then the Road Warrior close behind, and Beyond Thunderdome is fine, but I hated on it way too much in this video.
And we've got a 2 coming out, and even a 3 is on the horizon too, so...
Yeah.
The characters will continue.
So yeah, that's what the sequel plans were at the time in 2015. Obviously, things are a lot different. Now, mind you, you're watching this in September, but or this is coming out in September, but I'm shooting this at the end of June, so all of this may change by the time September comes around and I actually put this video out. But yeah, Wikipedia talks about the title Mad Max The Wasteland, which apparently was going to be the title of a 5th movie after Hardy did 3 more movies. But that was way back in like 2011, and then 2015 they talked about that. And then they talked about sequels and The Wasteland being a working title for one. And I remember The Wasteland being one where like everybody was talking about it, like, okay, when are we getting that? When are we getting The Wasteland? And I'm not really sure where that is now, but we are going into this Furiosa prequel with Anya Taylor-Joy, which, like, as of now, it says is May 24, 2024. And last year, 2 years ago, Junkie XL confirmed that they will be scoring it, which is great. So, yeah, it's Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth, and Chris Hemsworth is apparently, we don't know what that part is. So I'll be curious to see what all... And I know Nathan Jones, I think is his name, that plays Rictus, is also in it, confirmed. So we'll see. But that's where we are now, and that's... Yeah, I don't know... I guess I'm fine with a prequel movie, and I'm fine with the Furiosa movie. I'm just so tired of Anya Taylor-Joy at this point. I think that's what's holding me back from going, fuck yeah, let's do this. But, yeah, but I'll definitely keep my mind open much more now that I know that greatness can happen. Now the trouble is trying not to get too excited and then starting all over again with where we started with this one. But we'll see. It's really hard to not have faith in George Miller at this point. 3,000 Years of Longing, obviously, was not great, but when it comes to this world, he seems to really be specific and know exactly what he wants, so hopefully we'll get something great out of that also. So I think that's pretty much what this revisitation of Fury Road is. So yeah, obviously I have much more respect for it and much more understanding of what makes it so great. Which is fantastic. It would have been such a loss for this to stay one of those movies where I say it's good, but I don't get it. No, I get it, and it's great. So we're gonna do this again, probably next week, from the time you're seeing this or the time it goes out, where we're gonna go into a comedy from 4 years ago that I feel like I didn't really give a fair shake. So that'll be fun to go into. Very fun to go into. So until then, I think that's it.